This is Kingdom Faith, where we focus on the Christian life, the good stuff, and the hard stuff. On this week's episode, I have Pam Baker. Her dad was on here. Her dad is Phil Jones, one of the pastors here at New Life Fellowship. I don't really know a whole lot about you, Pam. You know, you've come and you've come for a while now to the church.
Actually, I was with New Lifehouse a year. February 12th was my year I've been over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know a lot about you, so I'm actually excited to do this podcast just to learn a bit about you. You know, you've come in here, you've helped clean the church, you've done things, you work over at the Women's Lifehouse. So this will be good. A lot of our church listens to this podcast as well, so they'll get to know who you are and what you went through and how God has helped you through the things you went through. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Pam.
I'll be 48 this summer, which the years sneak up on you.
Yeah.
I have one child. He is 24, Jordan. He lives in Michigan with my ex-husband. It's kind of a long story. It's not his real dad, but he raised them.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a good husband, but he's a good dad. So Jordan's kind of doing his own thing. He lives there. I miss him a lot, but It's kind of good, the separation, just because I guess it's kind of like I've always needed to feel needed. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's good for me, too, to be away from him. But I just had one. I used to want a lot of kids, and then I met his dad, and that kind of deterred me from wanting more kids.
Yeah.
Being a single mom. I moved here to Huntington a year ago, a little over a year ago. I do home health. I'm a CNA by trade, a nurse's aide. And I've been doing that kind of work since I was 18.
Mm-hmm. Why do you like doing that work?
I think a lot of it is I come from a long line of preachers and nurses. Mm-hmm. And my mom's a nurse, and then my dad is a preacher. His dad was a preacher. Mm-hmm. So just that nurturing, caring aspect, I love taking care of people.
Yeah. That's something that I've noticed about you, Pam, is that you love to help people.
Yes.
And obviously, it's great that you can have a career that you get to do that. I mean, it's funny. I never really put two and two together about your dad being a pastor and your mom also being a nurse, and that kind of, generational wanting to help people in whatever capacity.
Right. It kind of just all. I did hospice for almost 10 years, and a lot of people are like, because I'd say I love hospice, and they're like, how do you love hospice? Yeah. But it was probably one of my favorite jobs I had, and it was just because you can, at someone's darkest time in their life, you can be positive. And I remember always asking people, like, do you feel better than when I first got here? Yeah. And that was always my goal, which is kind of how I want to be now, even at the Women's Lifehouse.
Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about that. How long have you been the night manager over at the Women's Lifehouse now?
The day I moved in was February 12th of last year.
Okay, so you've done it a little over a year now.
Yeah.
What's that like?
I love it. It makes me feel like everything I went through has more of a purpose because I can use that to help the girls. I mean, down to so I have fake teeth from years of drug use. Mm-hmm. And one of the girls got dentures, so it was cool because I could be like, girl, and I could teach her how to put the glue in. I mean, just little things. Or girls that, I remember one girl didn't want to come to church one day, and I was like, why? Just why? And she said, because I've done some really messed up things. And I said, well, so have I. I said, I did drugs for over 20 years, and another girl came out and said, you mean to tell me the preacher's daughter's a crackhead? So it's kind of cool because, yes, a preacher's kid, which we'll get into in a little bit, but it's neat because I can use what I went through for years. I thought was just a horrible part about me. Yeah. And now it's like God has turned that around where I can use that to help someone else. Mm-hmm. And it's some days are harder than others. Oh, yeah. I've really never had a lot of female friends. If you told me 10 years ago I'd be living in a house full of women, yeah, right, because I'm kind of a tomboy. Like, I don't like women, and I don't mean that in a funny way, but so yeah, it's good for me in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. So you say you don't like women. Did you have any sisters?
I have one sister.
And then you have two brothers.
Mm-hmm.
You tended to probably maybe.
With my sister, it was more like I was the only girl for 5 years, and me and my dad, he took me fishing, like that was my dad. And then here comes this other person, and I struggled for a lot of years with wanting to share my dad with her. Mm-hmm. And when I say didn't like being around women, a lot of that stems from living a lifestyle, not a Christian lifestyle. Yeah. Women in that lifestyle do cheat with your man, could be your friend, and she goes out and sleeps with your man, or just in the way of life that I was living. I just was like, no, and it's now I embrace it. I mean, I don't know how to.
Yeah, it just kind of. I find that interesting because you do now live in a house sometimes with 8 women.
Yes.
7, 8 women.
Someone told me early on in my recovery that if you're not uncomfortable in your recovery, then you're not doing something right. So if there are days where it's a little uncomfortable, which, but it keeps me on my toes and it keeps me very humble.
There's something I always say when it comes to things that God calls us to, is if God will always call you to something that is uncomfortable. It's always gonna put you in a place that it's gonna feel odd, or it's not gonna feel right, or it's not gonna feel comfortable, because that's the places where we grow.
Yeah.
Same thing with recovery. If you want to grow in your time of recovery, you're probably gonna be uncomfortable.
Most definitely. Moments. And a lot of it, I think, is just because you're not used to. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, but then for years I didn't go to church, and so just even being back in church is rather new to me.
Yeah.
Because I ran for a lot of years.
And that's a huge benefit, too, to recovery or whatever. So tell me, Pam, how and when did you get saved in your life?
So I was 5 years old. We were at Northwest Baptist Church, was one of my dad's churches. And it was Vacation Bible School. And I remember getting saved at 5. And then I was either like between 6 and 7. My dad baptized one of my brothers and I on a Sunday, so that was kind of neat. So from a young age, I accepted Jesus.
Yeah. So, some people might have a hard time even thinking. What really at VBS made you be like, yeah, I want to follow Jesus? Was it something you heard? You always remember your dad talking about it.
Yeah, and I remember, just with his dad, my grandfather being a preacher, I just wanted that. I wanted that reassurance that I was going to go to heaven if something happened. And I mean, a lot, we just talked about losing brain cells, and I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember her taking me to the side and praying with me, and I just wanted that reassurance.
It's something I said when your dad was on was, I love to hear people when they got saved, because people get saved in all different ways. And your dad, has always talked about being saved at 4 years old. And I've always find it interesting because I wasn't saved at 4 years old. I was saved at 15 years old. And I know people that are saved at 30 years old. It's just cool to me to think that Jesus takes his hand down to a person at any age to call them to a relationship with him.
In fact, it's pretty cool because my dad led my son to the Lord when he was like 5, young. Yeah. It's kind of neat.
And I always try to encourage, people, it's never too early to share the message of Christ with your kids, because you don't know what Christ is doing with a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, and so on and so forth. As long as they know who Jesus is, and you always know when it's real, because later on in life, which we'll get into, you'll fall back on, I do have a relationship with Christ, even if you're not doing the things you're supposed to be doing. Right. You can always take a step back and look at your relationship that you had when you were 5 or 6 or whenever you get saved. But that's so wonderful to think about. So you're saved. You're the daughter of Pastor Phil Jones. He when he was on, he talked about his crazy journey. Well, guess who's right along with him? Pam.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Little Pam is watching Dad go through the churches that he went through and pastoring and doing those things. So what was that like to be what people call the PK or the pastor's kid?
Sometimes it was hard because a lot of people thought we had to be like on the same spiritual level almost as our dad, like we were expected to be
Yeah.
like the people in church that sat up straight in the front row, and
The chosen child.
right, and that was hard
Mm-hmm.
because I remember people telling my mom like, I can't believe your kids were doing that,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like it was hard. It was hard because you wanted to fit in, and then at the same time you knew that shouldn't be, you shouldn't want to fit in with people that weren't Christians, you know what I mean? And so I struggled a lot. I struggled a lot more so as I got older.
Yeah.
When I was in 8th grade, my dad moved to a different church, and we went from the same school I had went through my whole life till 8th grade, like kindergarten to 8th grade, and we went from a Christian school to a secular school, public school.
Mm-hmm.
And at being 14, I thought it was, I mean, it's crazy when I think back now, but I remember kids tell me, you're pretty cool for a preacher's kid. And so, like, that rebellious nature that I already had, like, it just kind of pushed it.
Yeah.
Like, and even so, as in my adulthood, like, always looking at guys who are like the bad guys, like, I was attracted to that. And I'm not saying it's right, but, like, yeah, it was hard. It was a struggle.
Yeah. With being a pastor's kid and you got these expectations from outside of the people that are in church and then even people outside of church.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, especially when we have this, when we're young, I don't care who you are, every young child has some rebellious nature in them. They want to do their own thing. Every teenager wants to do their own thing.
Yes.
And hopefully you can guide, parents can guide and direct, but sometimes that's not always going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes, a child has to figure out things on their own to some degree. You do your best. But when you have kids, as a pastor's kid, I can imagine, when you have kids that you were going to a Christian school, now you're going to a secular school, and then you like you said, you kind of have this rebellious nature, and they're like, you are pretty cool for a pastor's kid. That almost makes you want to keep doing the things you're not supposed to be doing.
I think a lot about the that movie. You might not remember because I'm way older than you. Footloose, the preacher's daughter.
Yeah.
He wouldn't let her dance, so we couldn't go to dances. I still don't know how to dance. My whole life, people are like, "Really? How do you not know how to dance?" Like, I don't know. I went to every single one. Sorry, mom and dad.
Yeah.
But I did. It's just funny.
Yeah. So I can imagine there's some pressure from friends at school or peers or whoever that are almost making you feel good for doing maybe some things that you're not supposed to be doing.
Right.
If I had to guess. So you got these expectations that are impossible for almost anybody to live up to.
Right.
Like I said, you're not the only one. I've heard this talked about other pastors' kids.
Oh yeah,
before.
People always say that PKs and missionaries' kids.
Oh, I can't believe that the pastor's kid is doing that or doing this or whatever. But so walk me through, Pam, how did you start going down this kind of rocky road of life? I don't know all the things you've done in your life.
So there was a man at our church in Onstead, which is where I started going to public school, and he would take us on all these trips called the Overlanders. And he went to our church, and we could work for him, and we'd be able to go as like a counselor, and we go take kids from inner city Chicago out west. It was so cool. Like we would go take barbecues, blankets, and coats down to people in Chicago, and feed the homeless, all kinds of stuff. And so I remember, like, I always wanted to save the world. Like, I just wanted to, I wanted to go live at this one place called Jesus People in Chicago, and it's like a commune almost. My dad was like, you can't do that. And I just remember I did that in high school, and I graduated high school, and as soon as I graduated, I went right to college, which we went to, my brother, the one that I got baptized with, Greg, we both went to the same college because they had a Christian worker scholarship. So like half our tuition was paid. And I still was kind of like I mean, I smoked cigarettes at a young age, and I was promiscuous at quite a young age. But I remember I never got into drugs until college.
Mm-hmm.
And I started out smoking weed, and
Do you remember that first time at
yes,
all?
yep. I remember what movie I went to see and everything. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like my progression into drugs was fast.
Yeah.
Like I did that at 18, and by like 21, I believe, is when I started using cocaine. And then graduated from college. I kind of just went for 3 years. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I just ended up getting my associate degree in liberal arts. And then I moved in with my friend in Ypsilanti, which I don't know if people know Michigan, but it's kind of a rough place.
Yeah.
And I lived with 4 girls in a 2-bedroom, but that's where I met my son's father, which leads me to a real rocky part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the run from parole, and he was like, I'm going to California, are you coming? And I was like, yeah. So, like, this is, like, something I'm very ashamed of still. Like, I didn't tell my parents that I was leaving. I just took off.
Yeah.
So they didn't know where I was for... My mom would know exactly how many days, but, yeah. And I was out in California. He introduced me to crack, which is a little harsher than coke, and I did that for about 2 years with him, and then we went to California. Well, I ended up getting pregnant out there, and instantly I quit doing drugs. I wanted my mom. There's a Johnny Cash song. Conway Twitty. That's my job.
Yeah.
So I think of my parents when that song plays because like they sent me money to come home, and I came home. And speaking about preachers' kids, like I remember my friend telling me my dad got in front of the whole church and he was like, Pam's coming home and she's pregnant, and he said, I'm telling everybody all at once so no one can just talk about it. And I've always really appreciated that about my dad, because he just was up front and just real this is what's happening. And so
what was it like coming home? So how long do you think you were gone?
I was in California. Let's see, I think I got there in November and we came back in February. So I wasn't there too long.
But did mom and dad know that you were out there?
Yeah, eventually, once I went to visit my cousin, like in Iowa.
Okay.
And she told my Aunt Ruth, who's my dad's sister.
Yeah.
Once Aunt Ruth knew.
It comes back.
Oh, yeah. And I just was on this. I like looking back, I'm like, you are crazy, because I can't even imagine making those choices now. Mm-hmm. But I ended up coming back and had Jordan. His dad turned himself in. Mm-hmm. But we just never worked because, like, the day we brought our son home from being born, he cheated on me and got the girl pregnant. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that, just my idea of this perfect little life, was like, dad, just, it was terrible. I'm trying to think. So, like, I would get clean. Like, I had Jordan. I was clean.
How old are you when you have Jordan?
I was 24.
24. And
I ended up, like, I had my own place. Then I moved back in with my mom and dad. I ended up getting married, which I'm in the process of writing a book called Don't Marry the Dope Man. Yeah. And I don't really want to go into all that just because, I don't know, is there copyright laws? Like, I don't want to talk about my ex-husband. Yeah. Like, get him involved in some police stuff. But I married someone, he loved Jordan. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's who Jordan lives with now. Yeah. We were married 6 years, but we still dibbled and dabbled. I mean, he was my cocaine dealer. Then we got clean together, but it still didn't work out. Mm-hmm. And so after we got married, Jordan was 3. And then after 6 years, I asked for a divorce. Just, there were a lot of reasons. I became a single mom, and I have never gotten remarried since. Yeah. My drug use, it was like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like random. Like, I would be clean for a couple years. And even my mom says now that she's like, you hit it very well. Because it was like, when I say functioning addict, like I was working 2 almost full-time jobs for 13 years. Mm-hmm. And I have a friend that tells me, you taught me the meaning of exhaustion. Like, I would do drugs all night and then go to work, and I tried to still portray that I'm this great mom.
Yeah.
You know, and I can say.
So what was it like? Because I find this pretty interesting. You know, you're functioning addict is what you're saying, and there's a lot of people that do that. Because I remember when I started doing some drugs and things, nobody knew. I was very good at hiding it,
Right.
and my mom was very surprised to know the things that I had done when I got saved, and told her, you know, some of the things that I've done. She didn't believe me at points when I was telling her. So when you are going through this cycle of getting clean, what inside of you makes you want to get clean when you're doing drugs? Did you have, like, what reason did you have to want to get clean?
Just because you know, they say a lot of in recovery, they say it's insane to think that you can go back and use and everything's going to still be okay.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, it gets worse every time.
Yeah.
Which is what started happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then the year my son graduated was in 2017. He's like, that was my world. Like, I'm a mom. I went to every band concert, like every, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Jordan graduated, and then one of my very best friends just dropped dead of a heart attack. And my job at Hospice, which I loved, I ended up quitting my job just because, I mean, I was spiraling.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan was not even staying at home. He was staying with his stepdad. And it got really bad. In my last relapse, where I hit my rock bottom, it was worse than it had ever been.
Mm-hmm. So what does that rock bottom look like?
Man, I remember I wrecked my car.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving home from work and I started coughing, and I don't even really remember what happened. I knew I had been up for like 3 days.
Yeah.
Still going to work, and I hit like a telephone pole. So then I had the car towed to my house, and then I sold it the next day. They do like this for scrap metal. They came and brought me money,
Mm-hmm.
and I smoked all that up.
Mm-hmm.
And then that night I remember, it's funny because I forget a lot of things, but I remember this specifically. I remember I'm laying in bed trying to sleep, but you can't sleep on that drug, like it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I reached in my purse to find my inhaler because I've done a lot of damage to my lungs
Mm-hmm.
through the years. And I grabbed my perfume and I hit my perfume instead of my inhaler, and it was like
Yeah.
I remember that. And then that morning, so now it's morning time.
Mm-hmm.
I remember walking by this mirror and I looked at myself and I was like real skinny.
Mm.
My eyes were real sunken. I was like, man, I don't want to die like this. And I called my baby sister and I said, I can't do this no more. And really, like, they didn't know. Like,
Yeah.
saying that I was good at hiding it. I don't want to hide. You know what I mean? I don't want to live like that anymore. So for years, you know, my dad retired. They moved to Indiana. All my siblings live here, and everyone's like, you got to move to Indiana. And I was like, of course, being rebellious, I am not moving to Indiana. And then here I am.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how I came to Indiana. They came and got me the next day. Her and her partner, she's with a woman. So
Mm-hmm.
they came and got me. And I stayed in Kendallville for the first 4 years I was here. So.
Mm-hmm. So when you're doing when you're at your rock bottom, and I think what you said is powerful to at least me. You looked in the mirror and you're like, I don't want to die like this.
Mm-mm.
You know, and I can imagine everybody's rock bottom looks different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but there's a realization when you begin to look at yourself in the mirror and you're doing things you're not supposed to. You know, so how you said you were really good at hiding it. When you talk to your sister or mom or dad or whoever, what was their reaction like when they started to realize, oh wow, our daughter is a lot worse than we thought she was?
So, okay, repeat the question.
Mm-hmm. So what was the conversation like, or what was their emotion or feelings to when you were like, hey, I'm a lot worse than you guys think I am?
Man, and this is a blessing because, like, from my brothers to my sister to my
Mm-hmm.
parents, is we love you and
Yeah.
we just want you back.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always, even when I was in California before I came home, I remember my dad telling me, I don't care what you've done, where you've been, I just want you to come home.
Yeah.
And so when Carl spoke on Wednesday about the prodigal son, and it just touches me because I feel like that, like, and my family, that is a blessing, such a
Yeah.
beautiful thing that, and they all said that. I mean,
Yeah.
in different contexts maybe, but it was all just, we love you, and we need
Mm-hmm.
you around longer, you know?
Mm-hmm. You know, and there's a lot of people that maybe don't get that type of support. So I'm glad you said it. You know, it's a blessing that you had
Man.
mom, dad, brother, and sister. You know, who didn't care the position that you were in.
No.
They just wanted you to come home, and I think that's pretty powerful to have. You know, and then like I said, there's not everybody has that. So like I said, rock bottoms look different for people because some people don't have places to
Right.
go at
Right.
when they're at rock bottom or
Which is kind of neat about when we go back to the Lifehouse. It's kind of cool because maybe I could be that person for
yeah.
someone. Like, it's okay. You don't got to live like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so.
So where's God at in all this picture in your mind? So you're
Like when I'm using?
yeah, like when you're doing things you know you're not supposed to be doing, like drugs or you know promiscuous things or whatever. Um, where do you feel like God's at in all this? Did you feel maybe He was far away from you? Did you feel like you were just running from Him?
Definitely running, and definitely I felt like he was far away.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look back now and where I'm at now in my walk, it's like
Mm-hmm.
he was there the whole time,
Yeah.
you know. And a lot of my triggers back then were like lonely. Like if I
Mm-hmm.
was like, everybody else has a man, I don't have a single mom, and
Yeah.
I would just Jeremy Wall in class. We've
Mm-hmm.
talked about that because I'm starting to help in the recovery class here at church too, and he talks about that. You know, when you talk to yourself a certain way, like, and that's what I think. Well, I know I did that forever. Like,
Yeah.
you're just a screw up. You're the
Mm-hmm.
black sheep. You're this,
Yeah.
and you know, just I just kept God a distance away, even though He was right there.
Yeah. You know we're you know and when we're doing things we're not supposed to be doing, we tend to do that. God, you know, I know that you know you can hear me. I know you listen to me, but God, I want you to stay over there because if you come closer to me, things start to become real.
Right.
You know, it's easy to do your thing. It's easy to be rebellious when you say, God, you know, just take a seat over there. I'm gonna do my thing.
Right.
But when He starts to get close to you, and you start to allow Him to get close to you, then you're left with no choice but to face the realization of the things that you're doing.
Right.
You know, so you know, I think that's kind of neat. You know, because I've had you know Jeremy has talked about his testimony, and you've walked the same path in a lot of areas, but they're totally different.
Yeah.
And your rock bottoms were totally different. Um, and what I find neat is that God is at the center of both of those stories, your story and Jeremy's story, and whoever's story that has made it through recovery or battling through their recovery with the Lord. And God's at the center. And I like what you said is that, you know, looking back at your life, you know, it felt like He was far away, but you know now He was there the whole time.
And I chose to put Him there. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's neat how I actually. I don't know if you were gonna ask me this, but how I ended up coming to New Life
Mm-hmm.
was I was in Kendallville and I had my own trailer with a guy that didn't work out. Then I met another guy, and here I am thinking, man, I'm going down the same. Is it that serious that I need someone that bad, you know? And I remember the second person, I had moved into his house, and he just broke up with me. He was talking to other women, and I was angry. And I remember going back to my sister's, and I didn't want to be back there.
Mm-hmm.
And I had came to church a few times, but I remember specifically this Sunday I was coming to church, and it was real icy. And I remember praying the whole way here to Huntington from Kendallville, and I was like, God was telling me, you know, if you want different, you have to do different. You can't just be like, God changed my life and not be willing to do anything else,
Yeah.
you know? And so I remember growing up, my parents always said, God told us, like, we need to move to this church because that's what God wants us to do. And I remember growing up like, Why doesn't he ever tell me what to do? You know,
Yeah.
I just remember, but this Sunday specifically, man, it was like all icy, and I'm driving and I'm praying, and I'm like, let me just get there. And when I came into Huntington, it cleared up, and I seriously heard God say, you need to move to Huntington.
Yeah.
And I had this peace, like, whoa. And it was like that Sunday, Carla came up to me and said, do you know anyone that wants to be the manager at the New Life Women's House? And I was like, whoa. Like, God worked that fast. And it was so cool. And now here it is a year later, and we're doing a podcast, and I'm helping in the nursery, and I'm helping in the recovery class. So it's pretty cool. I feel like you have to get quiet enough. Like, the world is chaotic no matter what, Christian or not. There's a lot going on. Yeah. But you have to stay calm enough to let God talk to you. If you're always just, man, this is going bad, this is bad, I'm this, I'm bad, you gotta just be quiet sometimes. Yeah. Which is hard for me sometimes.
I think that's good advice. Because the world is so loud. We're loud at times. Our thoughts are loud at times.
Other people,
And it can be hard to maybe hear what God's telling us to do. God's trying to encourage us. God's trying to show us what path to go on. But we're listening to all the loud voices other than the loud voice of God.
And what's crazy is, like, so I think I missed a part when I went to college. I was working for this place called Joy of Jesus, and it was an inner city mission in Detroit, and they did a lot of teaching, and they had like houses for pregnant single moms. They had a summer camp. I was a counselor for their summer camp. And so when I end up, after all these years, coming here, and it's like everything that I ever wanted to do as far as reaching out to people, helping people, it's all at one church. Like, we got the soup kitchen, and it's just so cool how it doesn't matter what I did, because look, you can still be used, and that makes me feel like I have a purpose. You know? And it's pretty cool. It's very cool.
And that's good to always remember. It don't matter what you've done in your past. God's willing to use you for the future of His will and His glory, all those things. But what do you think about, like, what was it like? Do you think it helped you to have these biblical foundations that you had growing up to maybe help you, like, at least come back to church, come back to
definitely. And I always say, like, the prayers of my grandma and my grandparents and the prayers of my mother. Like, I know that my parents still pray for us every day, and I try not to, like, hold guilt, because I do have guilt. Like, man, if I would have just listened to them from the beginning, But I think that, God, even on times where I wasn't living right, He still kept my son. I mean, Jordan has a great group of friends that are all Christian boys. Just God. I did start from very good beginnings, and I feel like I kind of squandered that, at the beginning. And so it's really cool to me how God brings you back to this place where I feel good and blessed that I can make my parents proud now. You know what I mean? And they always say, we're always proud of you, but to be my dad's coworker is crazy to me. Like, out of all of the siblings, I wouldn't have thought that he would be my coworker. It's really cool how it just all came back around.
Yeah, and I think it's so important for a believer who's like what we heard on Wednesday about the prodigal son. He had the foundation of his dad to go back to. And you did as well. Your parents, your siblings, you knew about God, you knew about the church, things like that gave you a point to come back to when you realize that I need to come home, I need to go back home. And so I think that's it's a message for a lot of people that are believers, that make mistakes like we all do, find themselves far away from home. Know that God's wanting you to come back home. He's got open arms and He's saying, come home. And I remember you kind of mentioned it a little bit, is I struggled with this same thing when when I did my lifestyle away from God, and the devil sometimes will bring it up to me still today, which is this deep regret for the things that I've done. Not so much the things I've done to my body, not so much, those things. It's actually more about you led a lot of people away from the things because of the things you did. And many times the devil will say, those people, they're never going to come to Christ because of you. They're never going to do that because of you. I always pray to God when that happens, because it still happens. I've been a believer for a little while now, and been living fairly decent. I still make mistakes just as anybody else, but trying to live my life the best that I can. The devil's still going to try to work in and try to lead you back to that place where you're not supposed to be. And I think that's just a good reminder that recovery, I think, is an ongoing battle.
Sure.
It's an ongoing struggle, or it's an ongoing process that you continually, and I believe it doesn't work without God. No. You can get clean without God, but when you get clean with God, there's something so much deeper that connects us and grounds us with a firm foundation that can't be broken. And to have that type of foundation that can't be broken is huge for recovering.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that's stuff that Jeremy talks about in his class and some things like that. But you got to get clean with the Lord, and you're still gonna. Why I said you're still gonna have struggles. You're still those thoughts are gonna come back. Those thoughts of loneliness and regret and guilt and those types of things. But I think it's always beneficial to remember that the Father's arms are open.
Yeah.
So Pam, where are you at now? So that's a heck of a journey that you've had, and I'm sure we didn't cover.
Oh no, I could.
Yeah, we could have went in a lot of details, but I think really the most important part about any testimony is, what is God doing with you now? How has God helped you? How has God changed you? So where does God have you at now?
So it's really neat, because I remember I'd have a bad day, and it'd be a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, a couple months ago, I was sitting there and I was thinking, and I was having my devotions, and I was like, man, I had a bad day in a long time, because it's like easier to get through the rougher days, because you know that it's just for today. Tomorrow's a whole new day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I still struggle with things, like my mom still wants to put soap in my mouth when I slip sometimes. That's something I'm working on, is, I always tell her I'm still a little rough around the edges. So I try every day to really make a point to seek people out that need love, you know, and I guess this could go with the women's house. Jesus said, love others. He did not say love the people who are easy to love, because that'd be easy, know? And so I still struggle, but my relationship with God is, I do my devotions, I read my Bible. I have a friend, a male friend, and we, hang out, and he's in recovery too. And it's like the people God sends to me encourage me, you know? And if you're seeking the bad things in life, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
But when your point and your focus is I want to be a better Christian, and I need to be stronger in my faith, you know? And it's cool because, little things happen, and like this is an opportunity for me to share what I've been through. Would I ever thought I would be doing this? No, you know what I mean? But it's cool. And just, I still have things to work on, but
we all have things to work on. But don't sell the things God's doing in your life for short.
Right.
God's doing mighty things in your life. I mean, just the one thing from taking you from drugs and putting you any place other than that is a huge step in the right direction. And you allow God to keep changing you and keep molding you to what He wants us to be, and that and that looks different for people as well. So
it's funny.
Let me ask you just really quick. Like you said, you didn't think you'd be doing this podcast. You didn't think you'd be sharing your story. maybe over at the Lifehouse or things. What does it mean to you that God has put you in a place to be able to share the hard roads of life and where He's brought you?
Man, gratitude. I gotta say that I am grateful for every day now. Like I said, I used to dwell on the negative, but man, when you're grateful for things, even the smallest things, like since I moved here, like my whole adult life, I had to work 2 jobs to put a roof over me and my kids' head. Now I live in a place where room and board is part of my stay, so I don't have to work as hard or even work full-time hours. I would say gratitude is a big thing.
Yeah.
You need to be grateful. Does that answer?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I think we take for granted the power of gratefulness.
Yeah.
It's easy to stay on the right track when you become content and grateful for the things God's doing in your life. It's easy if you're not doing those things. It's easy to be like, I don't like where I'm at, or I want this more than that, or whatever.
Like one thing I'm really grateful for is just the church at New Life, because I remember my parents. It was actually the church that we moved to when I went to the public school. And that church split 3 ways, and my parents were treated pretty poorly. And I didn't go to church on the strength of that for years.
Yeah.
How are you going to treat my parents like they're good people, And then I come here, and my mom had her first knee surgery, and I was like, Pastor Jimmy, like, they need this gravel in their driveway. And I remember coming the day of her surgery, and like 10 guys from church showed up and just did it. And that's beautiful to me. The church here is so... It's kind of the same thing. Like, no one here cares where you've been. Like, they just want to help you where you're at now.
Yeah.
And it's very cool. It's very encouraging.
And I think, if you can, when a church can do those things, it really shows the love of God.
I believe so.
It shows, just the thing that we're supposed to be as a family. And when a church is helping each other, encouraging each other, those type helping each other through sin, temptation, those things, it shows what the church is supposed to be. And it can, you don't use it as an excuse by any means, but when a church isn't doing those things, it's definitely a turnoff.
Yeah.
You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So I'm glad that you're here at New Life. I'm glad that you're doing the things. I'm sure you're helping with the recovery class now. You're doing the night manager stuff, which is not an easy job over there.
No, the recovery class, like, that's what I love about Jeremy, because he asked me to pray a lot, pray us out, and I might come from a long line of preachers, but I don't feel comfortable praying, and he's always like, well, get used to it. So just coming out of your comfort zone, again, being uncomfortable, but it's getting easier every week that I go, and
So it's beautiful to see people using things for the kingdom of God. So that's with recovery, that's with all those things. So Pam, tell me your final thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts to end this podcast?
I would just say, I heard a preacher, it was one of the churches my son went to, and Pastor Shante, he told me, he said, if God wakes you up to see another day, you still have purpose. So I just, I would like to put it out there that if anyone would like to talk to me, I'm a good listener, and don't ever think that you don't have a purpose, because, man, I feel like I squandered a lot, or wasn't grateful for the things I was giving at the beginning of my life, but I'm using it for God's glory now. And I would just want to put that out there that, if someone's struggling, like, you still have purpose, you're still here. Yeah,
amen. So that concludes our episode for this week. If you like this episode, you can share it. If you know someone that's going through recovery, share this episode with them. Like Pam said, you can comment. You can ask questions if you need encouragement, those types of things. You can email us at kingdomfaith2001@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for listening to Kingdom Faith.